All right, guys. So we've got John Wilhelm on the chat this month. He just came back from Korea with the Olympics. So I want to say welcome back and congratulations on getting selected there.
Thanks, Chris. Man, it's an amazing thing to be part of that, but I'm glad to be back. Glad to be spending a few minutes with you talking about my experience.
Great. Well, so can you kind of just give us a kind of a overview of everything that happened there, or how it just give us an overview of the experience, what it's like to work there?
Well, it's hard to explain. Still, I'm processing it, and I kind of sound like a dork because I say amazing about 20 times in the same paragraph or same sentence. But, it started almost a month before it, and we'll talk about the road getting there. But this year, the team wanted to have, the USA Bobsled Skeleton team wanted to have the same medical group working with the athletes for continuity's sake. So I actually took off right after Christmas, went over to Europe for 3.5 weeks. We were in Switzerland and Germany and Austria and back to Germany, competing in the last World Cups. And the team finally made the last selection for, who was going to be on the Olympic team just a couple weeks before we went. So the national team was actually competing with themselves and with each other and tuning everything up as far as bodies and sleds and just getting everything right. And so I was home for a week, and then we shipped out via San Francisco to Seoul. And you get into Seoul, and you arrive at what they call the nest, and you do team processing. And team processing is, downstairs you go in, and Oakley and Nike and Polo Ralph Lauren and, all these companies, Procter & Gamble and all these companies are there, and you get a sheet, and you just start getting stuff. You just start getting gear, and, they take really great care of everybody, coaches, medical, athletes, and you just go around, you get fitted for your Olympic ring, you get your picture taken, you get your opening and closing ceremony gear, and so we went through that whole process first. And that was pretty stellar because you really then feel like, okay, I'm part of not just the bobsled team, and I'm not just a team chiropractor, but I'm part of Team USA.
Right, yeah. So were you expecting that kind of arrival when you got there, or did it take you by surprise, or?
They had talked about it. Okay, team processing, you're going to get your gear, and they just kind of make it sound like, all right, you're good. But that was, so overwhelming and cool just in and of itself. And like I said, just kind of melded you together like, okay, we're Team USA. We got USA on our shoulder. We got the flag on our back. We're ready to go. So then you don't even have to carry your bags out. They have it all checked in. They mark it for what room you're going to be in. And then you get on a bus and you bus up to the Olympic Training Center. Get there and you have your credential and you're checking in and going through security and kind of getting situated. Chris, what it's like is I went to summer camp as a kid. It's something fun that we did for a couple of weeks. It's sort of like summer camp. You get there and it's all new and you don't know your way around. You don't know where the cafeteria or the bathroom is at first, and then you start figuring it out. You get used to who your roommates are, and I got to room with a couple other medical staff and also a couple athletes, John Daly and Matt Antoine from our skeleton team. And they're fun, cool guys, and so are the other part of our medical team. And so our team was, as far as bobsled skeleton medical, was orthopedic surgeon, sports chiropractor, there's me, athletic trainer, and then we had another chiropractor who does more of acupuncture. So he was kind of our acupuncture dry needling specialist. And that was what made up our crew. So you get to the training center, and then you're all about your work. People start training. We kind of had it split into weeks when the competitions were. Skeleton went first, and then 2-man and 2-women bobsled, and then 4-man kind of ended it out. So we were busy and cranking right as we went. So that was kind of what the process was like. Obviously there was a lot to it. Everywhere you walk or look, there's people from other countries, and this building is for France, and that one's for Italy, and that one's for Germany, and this one's the US. And it was just, I get excited about it just thinking about it. It was just overwhelming.
So did you work with just the sledding teams, or did you work with more athletes than that?
Well, Chris, that was my expectation. Hey, I'm here for bobsled skeleton. The way the road I took was through the NGB, or the national governing body. So USA Track and Field, USA Biathlon, USA Bobsled Skeleton, USA Curling. They're all separate kind of organizations under USOC. And the way it works is they submit names to the USOC and say, hey, these are the individuals, the medical practitioners that we've worked with and our athletes like. And so they submit your name, and then you have to go through the whole USOC approval.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's what I did. So when I got there, I thought, okay, well, I'm here for bobsled skeleton. That's who I'll see. But then when I actually got in the sports med clinic, Team USA, in the bottom of their building, we had a big, like, 19-story high-rise building. When we got in there, the bottom floor was where our sports med department was. And in that, we had kind of open treatment areas. And so I might be working on a bobsledder, and I'm next to a physio who's working on a snowboarder, or a massage therapist working on a cross-country skier or a biathlete.
Uh-huh.
And because of that, there was great exposure and camaraderie between the sports medicine professionals and
Mm-hmm.
between the disciplines, and also between the athletes. And there weren't a lot of chiropractors at the Olympic Games. Between the two villages, and we were at the mountain village and there was a coastal village, I believe there was only 7 of us.
Okay.
And so a lot of the athletes would see the other athletes getting chiropractic work, and they'd say, hey, I want that too. And so I actually ended up working on 10 different disciplines and 8 medalists. So it was pretty cool. I got to, obviously I love my bobsled skeleton people. Shout out to USABS, obviously, and thank you for bringing me along. But I got to work with snowboarders and skiers and biathletes and cross country and, just a whole bunch of different disciplines.
Okay. Well, so you kind of started there a little bit. Can you kind of talk about the path that you took and kind of, just the path you took and how you found yourself selected to go?
Yeah, you bet. So it started, I want to say it was like 2009. I was at a kinesiology taping seminar. I don't even remember where I was, Dallas or Chicago or something. And the guy teaching it, David Parrish is his name. He had been to a Pan American Games and Paralympics, and he got up in the front, was just kind of talking about his experiences. And here I am, I'm just a regular chiropractor from Montana going, man, that sounds pretty rad. I want to do that, And so I pulled him aside on a break and I said, man, how in the heck did you do that? Chiropractors can do that? He said, well, yeah, if you got multiple skills and you have some soft tissue work to support your adjustments, and you can tape and you can triage injuries, and you have your CCSP, and, you can go and be part of the 2-week volunteer rotations at the training center. And I said, you can be part of what? I had no idea it even existed. Uh-huh. And so then that made me curious. And so I researched it, and then I started working towards my, more and more certifications, got my CCSP, worked with my 2 local high schools, a bunch of road races around town, just started volunteering my time, getting experience. And you have to have some on-field experience and have to have, sorry about that, have to have worked with the team for, I believe it's at least 3 years, get some recommendations from coaches or ADs. Anyway, long story short, 2013, I find myself in Colorado Springs doing exactly that. And I thought, honestly, Chris, this is my Olympic experience right here. You know what I mean? It was so cool. I was treating, fencers and swimmers and, wrestlers and Olympic lifters and, all sorts of different sports there in Colorado Springs. And I did my 2 weeks, and I get home, and about 3 days after I get home, I actually got a message from one of the athletes via Twitter, of all things, because I had followed a bunch of them.
Uh-huh.
And his name is Kurt Tomasevich, and he was at that time going for his 3rd Olympics. He had already won a gold medal as a brakeman for bobsled in 2010. He said, John, we really liked what you did, a bunch of us here, and we're wondering if you'd like to come to World Cups with bobsled and skeleton. About dropped my phone and said, yes. I knew nothing about bobsled. Right. You know what I mean? I knew that I could adjust well and could get those guys moving, and that's what they liked.
Yeah.
And I find myself a couple months later in the lead up to the last Winter Olympics in Sochi, but I found myself in Calgary and Park City working with what was that time the Olympic team for that year. Mm-hmm. And then every year since then, I've been invited back to work with them. Athletes rate you and the coaches rate you. And if you do a decent job and don't really mess anybody up, you get to come back. And so then I just kept going back with them, gaining more experience. And then more and more each year, more weeks of volunteer time. And then as of November last year, I finally knew for sure I had 100% the invite. I'd kind of known spring and summer of last year that they were looking at me, and started filling out things about 6 months before the games with USOC, but didn't know for sure until November. So that was my road. It was, honestly, a little bit of luck, but a lot of hard work to put yourself in the right position with the right people. But I mean, if that athlete wouldn't have written a letter of recommendation and saw something in me, I'd be just another chiropractor back in Bozeman, Montana, who did a couple weeks at the training center,
Well, sure. So kind of based on that, what advice would you give the next guys that are looking to head that way? How would you what would you do to set yourself up to maybe make sure you meet that right person?
Right. So I was 7 years into practice, before I ever got to the training center and did any of that. In one way, I think, Chris, that was advantage for me because I had seen enough clinical cases and I had my hands underneath me and I wasn't totally brand new. And I think they have a requirement. You have to be 3 or 4 years out or something. So I would say, work hard, get your skills. Keep learning because you want to learn, not because you're trying to get to the Olympics. If you want to learn a new, stabilization or neuro technique, if you want to learn a new, whether you're a DNS guy or a neuro guy or a rehab guy or sports, whatever it is, soft tissue work, there's 1,000 different things, ART and Factor and Graston and you name it. So I'm not here to promote one specific thing, but I always liked learning those things. So the advice I give to students now is get your great baseline of just being a really competent chiropractor. The doors that have opened for me really weren't because I did soft tissue better or taped better, although I can do those things really good. It's because I could really adjust, and that set me apart from the ATCs or the PTs or the medical physicians that were there. So I think that's really important. But you do have to have some other things layered on top of that. So be really competent, obviously as a diagnostician and with your evaluation. If you're going to miss a bunch of things on an elite athlete, that's a good way to not get invited back.
Sure.
Certainly, Chris, you should have competency in rehab and soft tissue and all of these other things, but make those secondary to being a really solid chiropractor, and then add the sports specialty stuff on top of it. And then be willing to work. If the door opens, it may just crack, and you got to push yourself through it. So if I would have told that guy, I really like to come, Kurt, but I've really got a family obligation, or I'm busy in my practice, or I'm whatever excuse, I wouldn't have gone. I never would have gone to the next step. Or the next year when they said, "Hey, John, can you go to Altenburg, Germany?" which is probably the worst stop on the whole tour, this great place in the old East Germany. And I would have said, "No, I'd rather go to Switzerland. I don't really want to go there," or something. Yeah. That door would have closed and I may not have been back. So once you get in front of somebody and have that opportunity, make yourself available for it. I think the other mistake I saw some providers when I was at my first time at the training center and the times I've been back, the people that are volunteering, the mistakes I see them make is they go with an expectation. Okay, and they're sitting around at lunch or dinner saying, "All right, this is great, but how do we make it to the games? How do we make it to the games?" And yeah, we all kind of wonder that in the back of our mind, but you know what the answer is? You do good with the athlete that's underneath your hands. And that's it.
Focus on what you can control right then.
That's it. Yep. You're absolutely right, Chris. That you said it better than me. It's just, do good with the athlete that's underneath your hands, and be a genuine person and somebody that isn't controversial. You be part of the team. You're not trying to fix everything yourself, and you're not trying to be polarizing. You're not going in there talking about politics and religion and pissing people off. Honestly, just be a nice person. You know what I mean? Doesn't mean you can't have an opinion and be real. It just, you know what I mean? Just be somebody that people like to get along with. I mean, because at a certain point, Chris, you get to a certain level, everybody's brilliant. Everybody's got good hands. So what are they going to take? They're going to take somebody they want to hang out with.
Yep. That makes sense.
Yeah. So that would be the advice. Work hard. Make sure you put the right focus into what you need to. And then, when you have an opportunity, really seize it. And then just be a nice person people want to get along with.
Makes sense. So what, maybe specifically the games, but maybe even some of these experiences leading up to it, what's one of the big clinical lessons you've learned that is going to help you in practice and improve your practice?
Man, that's hard to distill down to just one thing. The nice thing about working with an elite athlete population, as you know, is when you do that, their bodies are such a template and so responsive. It's almost we're like working on little kids. You know what I mean? They just respond so quickly to what you do. So I learned a lot of clinical lessons from them as to, what is going to work with my regular population, because it works quicker and better with an
Right.
athletic population.
Kind of how should the body respond to this?
Yes, exactly. How should it respond? And so
Yeah.
with an ideal athlete that is going to be very compliant with your recommendations, and they usually are at this level. You have a certain expectation of how they're going to respond, and you learn from that. It fast forwards your clinical knowledge. There's nothing better for pressing yourself and for learning great competency than working with an athletic population, and especially an elite athletic population. But I learned some good lessons along the way. I learned things about how teams work and interpersonal relationships and drama, and when to involve yourself in that and when not, mostly not. Those were good lessons for me. I learned how to play well as part of a team. A lot of times as chiropractors, we come out of school and we're mavericks and we start our own clinic. Working with Team USA and USABS and now in the Olympics has really taught me that, guess what? Orthopedic surgeons aren't bad guys and gals. They're people just like us. They put their pants on one leg at a time. They eat dinner like us. They get tired like us. And they really want to help the athletes just like us. They just have a different set of tools. And guess what? PTs are the same way. We don't hate them. They don't hate us. When you take the money part out of it, we all just are trying to do a great job. And guess what? There's really, really smart athletic trainers and really, really smart massage therapists. Some of them smarter than some of the chiros I know. Right. It doesn't mean just because you have DC or DO or MD or all this other alphabet soup that you're anything special. Get to know the person. And then once you do, you have the mutual respect of your team. Boy, there's nothing better than that, because I'd much rather approach that athlete with about 4 or 5 good friends who are also medical professionals who dedicated their life to it on my shoulder and who's got my back, you know what I mean? Or I've got their back, whoever's leading the deal, than all by myself having to be the only guy maverick out there. You know what I mean? So I learned that too.
So so now that you've kind of worked at, because you got your start working with like high school teams, and you've worked now with elite medical teams on elite medical or elite athletes, how have you noticed, what differences do you notice in those different levels of, I guess, medical providers with that teamwork function?
I would say that when you get to that point, it sounds weird, but it's all really cool people that get there. Yeah. Because I think along that path, you weed out the egos and the jerks and the people that are in it for themselves or that are self-promoting. So I think that's what I found the most is when you get there, everybody's pretty easy to get along with, pretty agreeable and very open. I mean, one time when we were in Pyeongchang, we were in the medical clinic, and I was waiting. I had about an hour till my next appointment. And I like to go down there. They had better TVs, big screen TVs we could watch the events on, and just palling around down there with some of the other providers. And I was like, you know what? I think it's time for the medical physicians to get an adjustment, and everybody else in this place. So I just started around the whole place. I said, all right, you get an adjustment, and you get an adjustment, and you know what? They loved it. Yeah. It didn't matter whether they were primary resident of sports med at Boston University or this big guy that's head executive director of such and such at USOC Sports Med, or this other one that's a PT of, the highest level of whatever where they are. They appreciated the sharing of services and that somebody was going to help take care of them, because guess what? They flew too, and they traveled, and they had stress, and just left in the hard bed. Yeah. So, and they liked it. So that was a fun thing. And honestly, Chris, I know we're probably going to ask this, but that was one of my favorite parts of the whole deal. There were tons of highlights, and then, like I said, I'm still processing it. But the time spent in sports med and the camaraderie and the banter between the athletes to each other and the athletes to their providers, and with the providers, commingling, was really some of the most special time that I'll remember. Yeah. Because you just have excellence and athletes around you. You might see somebody on a table and meet them and talk to their PT, and the next day they're out winning a gold medal, flipping their body around, doing something crazy in, slope style snowboard or half pipe ski, or, pushing their bodies to the limit in biathlon or cross country or, whatever sport it may be. So that was one of the highlights for me, for sure.
Well, that's different. It's a lot. It's so, it's different than in a lot of our clinics where we're kind of, it's us and, maybe a couple staff members or something like that. And you don't really get that that interaction between other providers, other than maybe, an occasional phone call or something like that, but not where you're getting to work day in and day out with those people.
You bet. And I think that's one of the special things, the reason why we want to be part of this. I mean, the Olympics is like that in general because, it's a special thing where you don't always get all those nations together and all the elite sports doing that together. Walking in the cafeteria, you look over and there's Norway and there's Sweden and there's Russia and there's China and there's the US and Canada, and you just go around the room and everybody's wearing their gear. It's pretty special a lot of ways, but like you said, to have, all those different providers working together and to have that interaction and banter, I walked away with a lot of really good friends with a lot of different initials behind their name than DC. And I'm happy about that. And I love being a chiropractor, and I make no apologies about it. And I love to adjust people. And I think it's something I know for sure that elite athletes need. And when we're around, they do better. And athletes like what we do, and especially if we can do a multitude of things. But we don't have to do everything. There's a lot of good people out there too. So there's this nice balance of being the best you can be and be able to tackle anything, and being also humble enough and grateful enough to know that there's other people that also have expertise and when to take the back seat and when to step in and be ready. And when you have to be ready, if you're going to hire out to be tough, you better be tough. You know what I mean?
Yep. So did you get to, you mentioned the other countries, did you get to kind of check out how their medical stuff was set up similar to ours, or did they bring chiropractors as well, or did you even know?
Yes, couple parts to that. So not as much. Team USA had their own medical area. Over the years, through Bobsled and Skeleton, I've met a ton of other physios and ATs and chiros even. Some of the other countries bring those, especially like Canada. They'll have a chiropractor with them most of the time. So I got to see Great Britain's medical layout and Canada's just because I had friends already there. But it wasn't like we were commingling in the polyclinic. USA, so the polyclinic was set up for any country, even small nations, to come, and they had Korean people staffing it, and somebody could come with their athlete and work there. We didn't go there because Team USA had their own area set aside, and most of the larger nations did. So I didn't get to inspect too much what the other countries were doing. I did get to walk through a couple of them, just kind of friends already. But most of what I did was on Team USA athletes at the sports med clinic or at the venue, the sliding sport venue that we were at. And in fact, they made it very clear that you're there for Team USA only. On any other athletes was a violation of policy. There's times when we're on World Cup tour with USABS where we get asked to help somebody from Australia or somebody from the Netherlands or maybe even a smaller nation than that, Jamaica or something. And we do that. And we obviously clear it through our coaches, administration, and our athletes to make sure they don't feel like we're, going outside of that trust. But at the Olympics, you were there for your country. That's it. And I got asked a couple times to work on other countries, but I had to politely tell them, nope, at the Olympics, I'm here for Team USA, and that's the flag I'm wearing. I'd help you out any other time, and I wish you the best. But they all have resources. It's not like they're totally left without. They can go to the polyclinic and get help. So.
Yeah. Do you know if there was a chiropractor available there, or?
I don't think there was at the polyclinic. I think they had PTs and, kind of the standard medical model over there. But for instance, one of my friends, came with the Nigerian women's bobsled team and helped them out, Todd Riddle. So he was there helping them out. And I'm trying to think. I tried to get a list. I know quite a few of the chiros that, came just in general for U.S. support. Like I said, there was one guy with Canada. I'm trying to think. Great Britain, Germany. I think Germany might have had a chiro. He might be an osteopath. He was adjusting anyway. And that's the thing. Sometimes it's hard to tell. Now PTs are manipulating and even ATs, and you don't know who's doing what where. But you can usually tell a chiropractor because of our competency and what we do, especially with the manipulation for sure. Yeah,
a little different, a little more in depth type of manipulations.
Yeah. So. If it's one of our main tools, we should do it better than anybody else. That's my opinion. If not, it shouldn't be for us. Somebody else should do it better than us.
That's very true. Yeah, absolutely.
Do it better.
All right. So favorite memory. And I would imagine that's probably several things and probably rapidly changing as we go.
Geez, you bet. I think the favorite moment for me, was a moment I got to watch. Well, as far as the sport goes, that was when Keegan Randall and Jessie Diggins won the cross country ski race, by a foot, where she, came from behind, stuck her foot out to win, just battled the whole way and won a gold medal, the first gold medal in the history, and actually the first medal in history for a cross country ski. That was pretty amazing. I think that even topped our own medals that we got in bobsled and skeleton. But I was happy for our athletes, obviously, to be part of that energy and to see them, our ladies, win a silver medal. That was fantastic. One of my favorite moments was kind of a personal moment. John Daly, I don't know if you know who he is. He's a skeleton racer. He came back in Sochi. He was in 4th position going into his final run. So if he would have had a good run, he would have medaled. And the way he was sliding, he probably would have. And he popped a groove. And what that means is they put their skeleton sled, skeleton is where they ride face down and jump on the sled. And they're in the bobsled grooves, but they're only in one of them. So they've got 2 runners on the bottom of their sled, and 1 runner is in the groove. And if you push too hard or don't push right, you can pop out of that groove, and your sled kind of goes to the side. And as you're jumping on, you lose all your velocity. And basically, if you pop a groove, you're done. And he popped a groove in Sochi, so at the last Olympics, on his 4th run, and went from 4th spot to 12th or something in that moment. And that was devastating for John. And to see John come back in the last year and a half, battle back and make the Olympics again. He was there, and he didn't medal this time, but you know what he did? He finished the way he wanted to. And he finished all the way down, and he competed hard. But before his very last run, so his 4th run of the games, before his very last one, he came up to each of us medical providers that were in there, and there was 3 of us. And I got to treat him and work with him right before his last runs. And, he said some very nice things and thanked us for being there in that moment. I'm getting kind of choked up right now, even thinking about it. But, that's a real moment when you know that you've been there with those athletes through the fire, and that they appreciate that, and that they know that you sacrificed to be there, and they show that appreciation. And then you get to hug them and pat them on the back and say, come on, let's get out there and do it one more time, Johnny. That was pretty special. So if I dilute it all down, I got to walk in the closing ceremonies, and I got to get the gear, and I got to live in the training center and eat next to the athletes, and, be part of a lot of really fun, times at the USA House. But probably my favorite moment was that moment with John.
Oh, that's awesome. That's really awesome. Is there anything else that you can think of about the whole experience that we should make sure that we talk about? Or,
well, I would tell anybody aspiring to do it, do it.
Do it.
Put yourself out there. At the very least, you're gonna gain some clinical skills for sure. And at the very best, you're going to find yourself around some amazing people and having some amazing experiences. The road isn't easy. Some people think it's all glamorous because the pictures that we post all look really nice and are really nice places, but there's long hours on planes, and there's, tough stuff along the way. And sometimes there's interpersonal drama and difficulty you have to deal with. But at the end of it, it's all worth it. And I always tell myself that the suffering that you choose to endure is always better than suffering that you don't. And so if you choose this path, be ready for some difficulties, be ready for some uphill battles, be ready for some disappointment, some worry. 2 years ago, I thought that I was out with Bobsled Skeleton. I hadn't heard from them. They hadn't called me back. I thought, man, I did good this last year. I thought my ride was over. And then I got the call last minute. Hey, we need you. We actually need you for 6 weeks instead of 2. Can you do it?
Yeah.
Yes, whatever you need. So be ready for some of those moments where you really feel like, man, I'm not good enough for them. But just keep pushing. If you keep pushing, whether you're a student, whether you're a practicing chiropractor, keep going, because it's way worth it. And if you can get there to that point, there's nothing better. And I thought, well, once I make one Olympics, I'm going to be like done and I'm going to be happy and satisfied. All it does is fire you up for the next one, man. I'm so fired up. I want to try to do it again. But if I don't and somebody else works harder and makes it, I'm going to be just as happy for them. So I'm just grateful genuinely to have gone. You know, if I flew the flag for chiropractic, which I did, I think very proudly, then I'm happy about that. I'm happy to represent my family, and certainly very, very proud to represent the United States of America. So that was highlight of highlights, Chris.
Yeah. Well, I definitely think that just talking with you, definitely how much you enjoyed the experience and how much you took away from the experience, it just kind of radiates off of you now. So even via an online chat here. So well, thank you so much for representing us. Thank you for representing Sports Council and for taking the time to talk with us today and share some of those experiences. And I can't wait to see you at probably at the next symposium. Might be the next time, but maybe somewhere in between there and then, and maybe chat about it some more.
You bet, man. Well, thanks for having me. Again, I'm grateful. I just see myself as just this small town Montana chiropractor, even still. And I've had some lucky breaks and worked hard. And so it just proves, I was never the valedictorian. I was never the smartest guy in class. I just worked hard. And so if I can do it, you can do it. Anybody can get there and do it. You just got to put your nose to it and see it through. So I'm very grateful to chat with you. And hopefully this inspires you or somebody else down the road. That's my hope.
All right. Well, thank you very much.
You bet.